Yeah, okay. Look, we got one Californian bird. We don't want another one. We got two. Okay. So, Spartacus, right? Or if you're in Cardiff, Spartacus, right? Now, shut up, Rog. Good. Now, there's one. It's amazing, isn't it? You can know exactly who's in the film. Kurt Douglas, Laurence Olivier, Gene Simmons, Charles Lawton, Peter Ustinov, John Gayen, and why is Tony Curtis at the end of that list? But Peter Ustinov was absolutely brilliant in the film Spartacus. If I may say so myself, I'm a big fan of Peter Ustinov. 4 Academy Awards, amazing. Film from the 1960s. All that we know about Spartacus is from the film, right? So I've actually got a checklist. Now, we're gonna do this in 2 ways. I'm gonna go through the checklist and see if the checklist matches the film, right? But what we need to do, we need to mention a couple of things about the film Spartacus. Now, we all love the Romans. That's why we're here. So the film Spartacus, 1960. I always used to think that the film Spartacus was before 1960. Not too far off from Christopher Plummer's epic that we've mentioned before, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. So there we go. Directed by, actually, here's a good question. Who actually directed Spartacus? And I wouldn't have guessed this.
David Lee, was it?
No, it wasn't.
DeMille?
No. No. Okay, I'm going to say it. You'll never... Go on, Bill.
Walt Disney.
Actually, you're on the same line. Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Stanley Kubrick directed Spartacus. And the thing is, right, Spartacus was an epic. And it had wonderful Roman uniforms. It had blood. It had crosses. It had gore. It had Peter Ustinov and his cat. It had the gladiators. It had the walls. It had the towns. And do you know what? When you think about special effects, it didn't need the modern day special effects to pull that film off. All I know is that lots of the films in the 1950s and 1960s had thousands and thousands of extras in it. So, you know, if they were filming this in Merthyr Mawr sand dunes, if you want to believe that legend associated with Lawrence of Arabia, that'll do, right? You had a chance of being in a film like this because if it came to town, right, they needed you. I can imagine Del in a loincloth. Del, you would make a really good Peter Ustinov and his cat at the end of the film, right?
I would.
You would. I can see it now. With your
it
nice
was
little...
me.
It was
you.
Me. Exactly.
I was there.
Shut up. You were nailed on a bloody cross. They got you out the way. Now, one thing about the film Spartacus, from the film we know it was about a slave revolt. Well, that's a fact. It's now referred to as the Third Servile War. The Third Servile War. Kurt Douglas played the title role. Obviously, I'm Spartacus, and so's my wife. No, that's a Monty Python, that is. The Roman general and politician Marcus Licinius Crassus. Now, that's an interesting one, Crassus. Now, the person who played also, this is another fact, Lentulus Bacteus was actually played by Peter Ustinov. He was in the end of the film, naturally. John Gavin as a young Julius Caesar. Gene Simmons as Varinier, is that right? I don't know. I'm getting a bit daft now. And Tony Curtis as Antoninus. You all remember Tony Curtis as Antoninus. Now, it was actually the wonderful Kurt Douglas's production company for producing this, and it was directed by an Anthony Mann, and Kurt Douglas thought, we're not going to have him, we're going to get Kubrick, right, with whom Douglas had worked before. So Kubrick, Douglas wanted it's unusual that Kubrick actually directed this film, to be honest with you. It's not really the type of genre that I would put Kubrick with. However, it's a blockbusting thing, and it was Kurt Douglas publicly announced that this was coming out, and President John F. Kennedy crossed the American picket lines to view the film, helping to end blacklisting. This was a time. This is another interesting thing, that there were lots of people that weren't able to be in films like this because there was a blacklist. No matter, you know, Kirk Douglas has got really colourful background. He's Jewish at the end of the day, and this was a time that either being Jewish, communist, or whatever wasn't popular. But this was a main star actor, and you'll know Peter Ustinov won the Best Supporting Actor, the Oscar in this film, and Peter Ustinov of all people, and it a wonderful role, best cinematography, best art direction, and I got to be honest with you, the film deserved this following title: Best Costume Design. You can't fault it. I tell you what, right? The costume today, in today's money, to costume all those actors, we would be talking in the tens of millions of pounds to do that. Just to, as you know, I've been on set many times, and I've seen costume, but I've not seen costume like this. I'll give you a little bit of a clue. Most of the costumes that you see in films today are made of rubber. Even they look really good, right? They look really good, but most of it's made of rubber because it's cheap and it's safe as well.
And in Zulu, Carl, the spears were made of rubber as well, because the government of the day, apartheid, didn't allow them any steel.
Oh, bugger off. Are you... No, really?
And you could see them moving, actually. If you look carefully when they're chanting before the final charge, they sort of flop around.
Oh.
There we are.
Really? Oh, my
Something
God.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, can you stop? So the... so it was the Baker rifle. It was the Baker, wasn't it?
Stanley Baker, yeah.
Did they actually use real rifle? They must have used real rifles.
Oh, yes.
Sure.
They're all Martini Henrys, yes. Yeah.
Oh, no, Martini Henry. Sorry, not the Baker. Oh, no, the Baker's earlier, isn't it? Yeah, the Baker rifle's much earlier, about 50-odd years. So, yeah, the Martini Henry. So, I'm a bit confused. How can you use Martini Henrys and not allow spears? I don't get it.
Because they were all white. The government didn't trust the black Zulus with real spears, just in case they went nasty.
Well, yeah. I think we need to get on because I'm absolutely gobsmacked. I'm absolutely gobsmacked. So what I want to do now is, we've done that little bit of introduction, right? I've got a list of facts associated with Spartacus. Okay, so actually there was a list of 30 facts, but I thought, oh my God, we're not going to get through this. We've already done 10 minutes as it is. The biography of Spartacus. Now this is one that surprises me. Spartacus was actually an actual Roman soldier. He was a genuine Roman soldier. His occupation at point of death was a gladiator. He was born around 109 BC. So, and he died on a battlefield. He actually died on the battlefield. He didn't live. He didn't survive the battle, right? Unlike the film, right? But he didn't survive the battle. The battle site of Petelia, P-E-T-E-L-I-A, Petelia in Italy. And that was in the year 71 BC. Now, this is real. The Spartacus revolt actually did happen. It was a real event. And lots of what we do see in the film were actually based on real events. Now, if I want to spout off what I remember about the film, I could actually probably go for a few minutes, right? And I'm sure we all could. Let's just test out how close the film was to these facts that I'm going to give you. Spartacus, how old did he look in that film? Well, obviously, at point of death, he would have been about 40 years old. I think Douglas probably pulled that off. Can I just mention something which is right off? I'm actually a big fan of Tony Hancock, right? And I'm a massive fan of the Carry On films, right? And do you know what? When Kenneth Williams was actually playing the old professor, and he was actually playing his roles in the 1970s, he was actually my age. And I'm just thinking, I can't get my mind around that. I just cannot connect with Kenneth Williams being so old, even in Tony Hancock's roles. And what I'm trying to get at is lots of actors looked quite old back then, and Douglas, you're thinking about, really played somebody who was in his 40s. So not a lot is known about Spartacus, but I would disagree. We know he was a Thracian. We'll have a look at that map as well. Thracia is part of modern day Greece. It's that bit of land that connects modern day Greece. What am I actually showing on the screen behind me as well? Because I don't know. Oh, right. Yeah, we're still looking at that. So let's sort of, yeah, there we go. We got Thracia. There you go. Now, he was a Thracian, right? Really known for their fighting, and he joined the Roman army as a young man. Well, so he probably joined the age of 16, 17. However, things didn't work out. And what did he try and do? He tried to leave the army. When he was caught trying to leave, he was sold into slavery as a gladiator. So this is, I think when you look at the Carry On film, Life of Brian, and you've got that discussion with Biggus Dickus and Intercontinentia, and the governor is having a good old chat. He says, I'll send you all to gladiator school, any more tittering. And if Roman soldiers didn't do what they were told, they were sent to gladiator school. So that's another interesting fact that we get from the film. Spartacus lived the life of a gladiator. He had no other choice. This was his thing, right? As a Thracian, there's a Thracian there with two spears. A Thracian never dies, and he was probably a slave. We don't know how long he was a slave for, but if he was a slave for like 15, 20 years, that's better innings than if you were in the Roman Legion, for example. Now, basically, I don't really know a great deal about gladiators, and that's unusual for me to say that. Did gladiators could be bought out of being gladiators, or they could, but did you just continue as a gladiator until you were killed? That's an interesting thing. So a gladiator is basically a slave. You had to fight until you were released, until you became a free person. You were forced to fight for the entertainment of the Romans. Well, we know that. We need to see the other film with Russell Crowe, and we need to that great film Gladiator. But it's a different sense of genre. And I gotta be honest with you, Bill will maybe agree or disagree. I think the opening scenes and the armor that they were wearing and everything in the opening scenes of the film Gladiator a couple of decades ago was brilliant. But some of the costume that they actually wore in the gladiatorial competitions in that film, I don't think were really great, right? But most of the costume that we actually do see in the film Spartacus is really, you're not going to use rubber masks and stuff. These are proper masks. So he was sent to gladiator school, where he constantly trained to fight. He was then put into the arena to fight animals or other gladiators. Some of the fights were to the death. Not all of the fights were to the death, because when you think about it, if you're fighting all the time, you're not gonna end up with many people who are still going to be alive. If everyone's being killed, then there's not going to be much sport for if everyone dies. Dells wrote this up. There are tombs on the Appian Way that show gladiators were able to achieve freedom and citizenship. Thank you for that very much, Del. I really appreciate that. That's a good one. Yeah, there was an opportunity to be free, but to be honest with you, if you were freed, then you're going to lose your best gladiator, and you're probably freed when you'd lost a leg or something, and you would actually, that'd probably be a good thing. If you're a gladiator and you had your leg cut off and you survived, you couldn't be put back into the gladiatorial arena. So surely you're going to be freed. I don't know if that was the case. So Spartacus must have been a good fighter and lucky to survive. Yes, very lucky to survive. And we actually forget about this, don't we? We think that the gladiators are always in the gladiatorial arena, in the Colosseum, and they're killing all the animals. There must have been at some point that the animals were able to turn on the gladiators and kill them themselves. If that hadn't been the case, then what would be the point in fighting animals in the first place. Really interesting stuff. His life as a gladiator was difficult. I'm sure everyone's life as a gladiator was difficult. He became tired of risking his life for entertainment of others. He wanted to escape and go home. A bloody long way to go home. Let's have a little look at the distance he had to take to go home. So obviously there is our Thracia and there's Greece. So what we're going to do, I think I've got a little bit of a map coming. I don't know which order these are in. Hang on. Oh, there we go. There's Greece again. So you're thinking about it. There's where he came from, over there in Eastern Macedonia, Thracia, and there's Italy. So how would you be able to get back? It's what is the distance there? So you've got about 1,000 miles to travel home. Would he have been able to do it? He would have probably been branded as a slave as well. He probably looked like a slave. I don't think he would have been able to get home. Even if he got home, he may have been shopped by the people he was actually getting home to anyway. So what was his alternative? He knew all this. He wasn't a stupid man. He had made it all the way from Thrace. He had been a legionary, and he ended up being a gladiator. He was fighting these gladiatorial competitions up and down Italy, probably ended up in Spain and other localities and all the rest of it. He knew the landscape. And obviously in that 15, 20 years that he was a slave, he was constantly thinking, how am I going to get out of this? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Am I going to be allowed to go home? And to be honest with you, I'm pretty convinced he wouldn't have been allowed to go. You know, the Thracians were a very proud people. So can you imagine? He gets back, and they know he's been a slave. You're a coward. You tried to leave the Roman army. They would have been interested in his achievements, and he would have basically been shocked. Another note from Dell: if a gladiator was it was part school, he or she could take part of earnings, therefore would have savings. A gladiatrix.
Yeah, if they were part of the gladiatorial school.
Yeah.
And some sort of, trainer person who owned them, they would earn part. If they were successful, they could earn
also
part of the profits.
And buy their way out of slavery, yeah?
Yeah, because they didn't have much to spend it on, did they?
No, not really. And women probably came free. So anyway, more of these sort of facts. Escape. In 73 BC, remember the battle's 2 years coming, right? The battle's in 71, 73 years BC. 70 gladiators with Spartacus as their leader escaped from a gladiatorial school, as portrayed in the film by Peter Ustinov. They were able to steal their weapons and armor and fight their way free. They fled to Mount Vesuvius. So now we've got that sense, of Pompeii. And they fled to Mount Vesuvius near the city of Pompeii, gathering more slaves in their small army as they went. Now, that's obviously portrayed in the film as well, where they go through towns and cities and they knock down the statues and they burn everything. I love all that. Fighting Rome. Rome sent an army of 3,000 men under the leadership of Claudius Glaber. Glaber surrounded the slaves at Mount Vesuvius and decided to wait them out. He figured they would eventually starve. Well, that's a good Roman strategy. The Romans did it at Masada in AD 71, so they did that a lot later. They did that with Vercingetorix, as we see two decades later. It's the best way to do it. Feed the troops, keep them happy. They can board game and whatever, right? So that's it. But we know that something went wrong in the film. Spartacus, however, had a different idea. He and the gladiators used the vines from local trees to rappel down the side of the mountain and sneak up behind Roman forces. So in other words, they were able to use the vines to just sneak up on the Roman forces without the Romans knowing they were there. They killed nearly all 3,000 of the Roman soldiers. Absolute slaughter. Now, most of the Roman soldiers were away fighting, as we'll look in my facts in a short while. Rome sent another army of around 6,000 soldiers. Spartacus and the slaves again defeated them. So army after army these Roman armies were defeated. Now that's the really interesting stuff. That's all in the film. We do see that in the film. These are facts I'm telling you. We do see that in the film. So when we look at films like Spartacus, we like to feel that it's all fantasy. Obviously it didn't happen, but it very well did. So obviously, here we go. We've already mentioned that we've got the film Spartacus. We've got where he comes from, Thracia. Where in Thracia, we're not exactly sure. They think they do not die. This is a Roman legionary killing a Thracian, or is that meant to portray the very great man Spartacus himself? The point where Spartacus dies, that man there from the Victorian period, that is Spartacus there at the point of his death. And very interesting, you see a man of African origin alongside Spartacus. Now, this is another thing in the film. We see people of all creeds, colors, everything in the film. And that's another thing as well. And what we see these wonderful Roman legionaries, early Roman armor, the type of Roman armor that Julius Caesar would have gone to battle in. You're talking about some really interesting headgear as well, and the death of Spartacus. And this is the thing. Spartacus's army was doomed to be defeated. The Romans were not going to allow Spartacus to get the upper hand very much more. But Spartacus had already defeated 2 Roman armies, which would be inconceivable. The fear of Rome, 130 plus years earlier on, the Gauls had sacked Rome. They had captured Rome, and it was the fear of Rome continually about Rome, the city, the eternal city, being captured. And could you imagine the absolute fear of through the streets of Rome at that stage, the great city of Rome, as home to this building empire, this building republic, I should call it. So the concept of the empire doesn't come in, but you know what I'm talking about. So this rebellion would have put absolute fear, complete fear, into the Roman population, and they needed to do something about it. So again, he's having to come all the way over. He eventually ends up into Italy, as we've already mentioned, and this great city, Capua, there as well. So we've got Rome, Capua. We've got all of it going down to Sicily. In the film, it portrays up and down Italy, right? We know what's coming next. So let's have a little look at some more of these facts with that there. The one thing you could obviously think of, that this big army of Spartacus with more and more slaves, what's going to be the downfall of this army of Spartacus? Food and water. That's going to be the downfall. That is going to be the thing. Probably not really portrayed in the film as much. Simple needs like food and water, that's not really going to sell tickets at that stage anyway. People don't want to see little children starving on the screen, right? It's not really sexy. More slaves join. As Spartacus continued to have success against the Roman army, more and more slaves began to desert their owners and join up with Spartacus. That's a really interesting point, a point that we were making last week in the classes in regards to slaves themselves. I mentioned that slaves weren't shackled; they were bound to the owner. They might be. Hang on a minute. Let's just hang on. Let that ring. Go over there. They were bound to the owner. So they weren't shackled. So in other words, you could basically say, "Bugger you, I'm off," and that's what would happen. But if you were captured again, something would happen to you. But these people, the people went out there. They were slaves. They wanted to join the Spartacus revolt. They weren't going to be captured. They were now free, and this is what they wanted to do. Soon, Spartacus' forces had grown to 70,000. That was probably the scale of most of the Roman army on the field at that time. 70,000. That's a massive amount of people. That's as big as the French army at Waterloo. 68,000 was in the French army at Waterloo. 70,000 is a massive army. And they don't have Tesco's by then. Even if they did, it was all empty. The gladiators used their fighting experience to train the slaves how to fight. They also had lots of weapons and armor from defeating the Roman troops. However, over the winter of that year, Spartacus and his 70,000 slaves camped in northern Italy. They raided Roman towns for food and supplies and trained for battles they knew would come. So that was all in the film, wasn't it? They sort of marched to the north, that was in the film, and then they were going to come back down south, past Rome, and maybe capture Rome. Really interesting, leading to the final battle. I think there was more than that. I think there was a couple more battles portrayed in the film, actually. The final battle, the Romans became increasingly scared and worried about this large force of slaves and gladiators moving about the country. They gathered a large army of around 50,000 soldiers under the leadership of the great Crassus himself. Now, Crassus, when you think about it, 50,000 soldiers, that's not far off the entire half of the entire Roman army on the field at that stage, right? If they had fielded 70,000, that would have withdrawn most of the Roman soldiers from the entire Roman Empire to fight another army of 70,000. But there were 50,000 Roman soldiers. At the time, Pompey the Great was returning from another war. The two generals defeated the slave revolt and killed Spartacus. Well, that's great, okay? Crassus, Pompey the Great, fair enough. But Spartacus survived in the film. That's one fact that they clearly got wrong. Interesting facts about Spartacus. The slave uprising led by Spartacus is called the Third Servile War by historians. So there had been other servile wars. There had been other wars involving slaves and gladiators and all the rest of it. The gladiators used kitchen utensils to fight their way to where their weapons and armor were stored. That's a rather interesting scene. You didn't see that in the film, did you? Beating people up with pots and pans. Spartacus's body was never found. His body was never found in the film because I'm Spartacus and so is Pat. However, most historians agreed that he was killed on the battlefield, not in the film. The Romans captured 6,000 slaves in the final battle. Now, that's also mentioned in the film. That fact of 6,000 slaves is mentioned in the film. And what was also done in the film, they crucified 6,000 of them along a road called the Appian Way, Dal, that went from Rome to Capua, where the rebellion first began. So we've got Roman Capua there, and we've got all of Rome, the Appian Way, leading all the way from Rome to Appia. Both Crassus and Pompey were rewarded for putting down the revolt by being elected as consuls in 70 BC. Basically, a consul were the leaders of the Roman world back then. You would have Pompey and Crassus. If Crassus power went to his head, Pompey could do something about it, and likewise. And usually what would happen is they would be elected as consuls of Rome for a year, but they might say that they might be re-elected for another year. And in many ways, that's where modern democracy derives from, because in modern democracy, in a democratic monarchy, you would have the head of state as a queen, and then you'd have a parliament. In the United States, you have a president, and you have the leader of the house. And this is based on this sort of Roman system where you'd have two people deciding what was going on in the state. Boris Johnson can't do anything without the Queen's consent. But mind you, the Queen can't do anything without Boris Johnson's consent. So this idea of two people in power goes back to the Roman sort of sense. The character of Spartacus was played by Kirk Douglas in the 1960 film, as we already know, and the movie won 4 Academy Awards. Now, what I'd like to do is have a little look at some facts. Here we go. Another thing from Dell. If this was BC, how come Gene Simmons came from Britannia? And there were references to Christ. That's a really interesting one because, that's a really interesting one. In the film, you got a sense that Christianity is already about. I get that, Del. I do. But Christianity doesn't turn up for another. Another 100 years. That's a really interesting one. And exactly. A bit about Gene Simmons. So what I'd like to do is let's look at a few more images and let's see and think about a few more facts associated with Spartacus. To be honest with you, I didn't really know that we would be able to do this to this degree this week. I just thought, right, next week we're going to be doing Varus. Okay, so we all know a bit about Varus, and that's going to be really interesting. I'm just going to make a note in my diary to make sure I've remembered to tell you that's what we're going to be doing next week. Varus, 9 AD, and the Teutoburg Forest and the archaeological evidence associated with that. So let's just sort of look at some of these images and then go back to my facts. So I think the one interesting thing is, and as you know, this is my Roman hour, so I can say whatever I like about the Romans. I'm going to move away from Spartacus for a moment, right? And what I mean by that is that you're looking at the world of Spartacus, and it's not the Roman Empire that you see at the time of Julius Caesar. Time of Spartacus, 70 years AD. By the time Julius Caesar clonks across the world, he's conquered all of Spain, all of Gaul. So Spain and Gaul are covered red or whatever color. He's also conquered Britain. Well, you know what I mean by that. He came, saw, he conquered, and he went away. We've got a lot more of Turkey gone, and also what's on its way not too long after is most of Africa and the breadbasket of Egypt. We've got to get that one from Cleopatra. So it's a very different landscape. And also when we go to Varus, we can nail it. The Romans also invade past the Alps into Germania, and that's something else. So what you're seeing here is probably at a push about a third of the Roman Empire that it would be become, because we haven't sort of sorted out Palestine and chucked all that in there. This is probably represents under a third of the Roman world as it would become 70 years later, only 70 years later. And when you think about 70 years later, the Roman Empire really never massively expanded after that. That's the height of Rome. By around the likes of Claudius, 43 AD, and that's where we go. A little bit more here and there. And there's, I don't know what the film would have been like if Kirk Douglas had died on the battlefield in the film. I think Kirk Douglas had to survive because it was a bit of that narrative, wasn't it? It would have been interesting. You can see Kubrick in this, can't you? You can see, right, if this was Spielberg, right, Spielberg would have done away with Kirk Douglas in the film, right? And Curtis would have been the later hero in the film. That's probably what Kirk Douglas would have been done away with. But I think Stanley Kubrick was trying to keep the film going, and he got the Oscar on that basis. You couldn't have Peter Ustinov speaking to Curtis; it just wouldn't have gone. You had to have the wonderful Kirk Douglas nailed up on that cross, looking down with tears in his eyes. That's Stanley Kubrick, and that's probably the only thing that they massively got wrong in the film. But then again, it's Hollywood. But the thing that they did get right was Spartacus was one of those nailed up on the cross. And there is the other point as well. Stanley Kubrick could argue that the body of Spartacus was never ever found. So how do we know he wasn't nailed up on one of the crosses? This is Stanley Kubrick working with you. He could say that actually, he had it right because the body of Spartacus was never found. How do we know he wasn't nailed up on the cross? It would have been a great secret. Everyone would have protected Spartacus. Now, the other thing is we could probably say about the film is that were the slaves given an ultimatum where they all gathered together and say, look, boys, girls, if you give up Spartacus, you can nicely go back into slavery. I don't think they would have been given that option anyway. They would not have made slaves. Can you imagine, Roger? When your wife left, you had that bit of freedom, didn't you? And you were never ever going to go back to women, right? I've had that feeling many times, and Roger, we always go back, don't we? Once bitten, exactly. I think the same thing about the slaves is there. What's that, Roger? Exactly. Stay away from women. Exactly. Pat accepted. But the main thing is, I think they wouldn't have been given an ultimatum. That's another thing. You know, that's quite clear. Now, I think looking at this statue by Denis Feuilleter, and this is a French artist. This is displayed at the Louvre Museum. This was carved out of a wonderful piece of marble in 1830. And the one thing stands out there is that you've got a wonderful muscle structure, but you've got a small penis, right? And this is a Thracian. And the Thracians wouldn't have been bothered about their manhood. They're not really interested in their manhood. What is important to a Thracian is their muscles and their ability. Everything else on the body is able to show off. You don't need a huge penis, which you might see the representation with the likes of Spartacus, but you don't see it in this statue. And I think the sculpture managed to get it right. Obviously, there's no facial hair, which I'm thinking that you would have with Spartacus as well. Maybe you might not have, but this is definitely what a Thracian should look like, and those great muscles. I think the body structure might be more of a man in his late 30s, but when are we portraying Spartacus? Are we portraying him as a gladiatorial slave, or are we portraying Spartacus just before he goes into battle? But the main thing is, this is a really nice, in-depth, gentle portrayal of Spartacus. It doesn't show the sword, it doesn't show the shield, it doesn't show the armor. We want to see the nudity, we want to see the bareness of Spartacus and what he was trying to create from this very statue. And it's very, very lifelike. And guys, we all know that our penises are quite small if we're naked, right? The fact of the matter is, I think this is what's being portrayed as well. What is being given away is the muscles and the legs and all that. And you get a you
Depends
want
on
to,
the weather.
Shut up, Del. Shut up, Del. Spoilt it now. But you can see exactly what I'm saying. Would Spartacus have had long hair? Now that's an interesting one. Do you know what? Right. I haven't had my hair cut in literally 2.5 years, and it's only down there. It should be down to my nether regions, but it's not. And the point is, maybe Spartacus just had short hair. Maybe he's one of those people like me that had short hair. You know, I've never been able to grow long hair, and some actual people can't really grow beards, so we don't really know what's going on. Dell's saying about yeah, this we you know, the thing is about this whole Spartacus thing, whether his body was found and all the rest of it. So what I want us to do now is I've got some nice little bit of text. So what we'll do there, we'll have that little bit of a scene up there, right? And it's good of Richard to join us. I didn't say hello to Richard when he joined us then either. Let's just do a few more facts about Spartacus and let's just see what we can do. Right. So by now we've worked out that Spartacus was a Thracian gladiator, right? Now there's question over when he was born. We know when the battle was. We know it was 71 BC. But some say he was actually born in the year 111, which makes him 2 years older on the battlefield. And when we do think about this, here's an interesting fact. He wasn't the only leader of the rebellion. There were 4 other known leaders of the rebellion. There was Castus, there was Gannicus, there was Creus, and there was Oenomaus. There were 4 other people who this rebellion could have been named after. The other thing as well is it's not actually known as the Spartacus Revolt. That's become this popular name. It's known as the Third Servile War. It is a major slave uprising within the life of the Roman Republic. Now, there are lots of contradictions with this type of event, and in many ways, this is similar to the Boudiccan revolt as well of 60-61 years AD. And why it's similar to the Boudiccan revolt is that one moment we've got this really, mind my French, pissed off woman that she's unable to be the leader of her tribe. And the Romans say, look, we're taking all your land off you after the death of her husband. And we then think was Boudica just the leader of the whole revolt? And I actually say no. I believe that Boudica is a figurehead, like Spartacus is a figurehead for this rebellion. The Boudiccan rebellion, the Spartacus rebellion, it makes sense. But it's very likely, like alongside Spartacus, that there were other people leading and running the show. You know, to lead a rebellion like this is a lot of work for one person, and it takes a number of individuals to lead the rebellion. You know, when you think about it, you've got a group of 70,000 people together. They're not all going to all agree, right? And to have different minds and different thinking and different people respected is probably the way to go in regards to any rebellion. It's like it would be like, you know, when in history, when the leader of a movement dies, it's usually the end of the movement. However, if Spartacus had been killed, there were 4 other individuals that could have led the rebellion. This rebellion, interpreted by some as an example of oppressed people fighting for their freedom against the slave-owning oligarchy, they were all the ones in charge, has provided inspiration for many political thinkers. The philosopher Voltaire described the Third Servile War as the only just war in history. Voltaire, eh? Although this interpretation is not specifically contradicted by classical historians, no historical account mentions that the goal was to end slavery in the Republic. So what the hell was going on in these people's heads? Now, I can probably explain that a little bit more, right? It was accepted to be a slave. It was accepted to be a serf in medieval society. It was accepted that as a woman, you can't carry gold. You know, it's like in modern day society. We've done it recently with the pandemic. We all followed the arrows up a street. How ridiculous is that? And you know, and we just when you get your mindset right, it's like being in a relationship, right? I've been in a relationship, and I'm not going to go into too much detail. And the person that I'm involved in the relationship with is abusive, but you stay with them. No, they can hit you, they can chuck stuff at you. You stay with them. They can hurt you, they can take your money, but you stay with them. And there's no explanation why you do it. So people accepted that they were slaves. So it was a big push for them to move out of being a slave, you know, and no historians say that, you know, that Spartacus didn't have a conversation with his gang, right, and say, oh look, by the way, you know, we're going to end slavery. At the end of the day, Spartacus had been a Roman soldier, so his family would have had slaves anyway. So it wouldn't have been a bit hypocritical for him to abolish slavery and then go back home to Thracia and then keep slaves himself. So, you know, this is the thing. So just a few little sort of little bits of facts. He was he came from a Thracian nomadic stock, you know, so he was a little bit of a wanderer in himself. And one Roman writer, a certain Roman writer known as Appian, the same spelling as the Appian Way. This Roman writer Appian says about Spartacus, a Thracian by birth, who had once served as a soldier with the Romans, but had since been a prisoner and sold for a gladiator. And And lots more could be said. Another Roman writer, Florus, says, Spartacus, who from a Thracian mercenary had become a Roman soldier, though had deserted and become enslaved, and afterwards, for consideration of his strength, a gladiator. And then eventually what we do have is things sort of move on. Lots more to actually be said about that. So obviously enslavement and capture. So the character that Peter Ustinov played was a character known as Lentulus Batitus. Lentulus Batitus. He was trained at the gladiatorial school at Capua, which is, as we've seen on the map, is south of Rome. Lentulus Batiatus. That was the character played by Peter Ustinov. And, I don't know why Kirk Douglas didn't get an Oscar for this, because it was a pretty bloody good performance. And Curtis's performance was pretty good as well. But that's history. So he escaped with his slaves, as we already know, and we see what's going on. So this servile war itself was not just a war, was not just something happening in Italy. There was a revolt in Spain. Yeah, there was a war going on in Spain. The people in Spain didn't want the Romans anymore. So the Romans were fighting as part of this war that was developing. So the Spartacus rebellion was part of that war, the Third Servile War. If you want to have a comparison, Second World War in the West and the Japanese joining, that's what we're sort of talking about. It was all sort of part of what we're going on. So what we're talking about, we've mentioned about all this sort of developing an army, and you've got the second victory over the Romans. They've got all this new military equipment, and what we have lots of people who are herdsmen and shepherds bringing their animals with them. So you got a little bit of food out of that. So the other point as well is, it wasn't just slaves and gladiators joining this rebellion. It was everyday Italians, Gauls, other peoples outside and within the Roman world, and also trained Roman legionaries and Roman veterans. So you're thinking, hang on a minute. This is what the historians are saying. It's not an uprising of just slaves. This is endemic in society, right? Endemic in society. This is everyone wants to be part of this rebellion. So the rural slave lived a life in the frontier, thus better equipping themselves to march with Spartacus's army. Really good thing. A slave lives on the edge. So you give a slave a little bit more, and they feel privileged, and they no longer feel lazy, and they feel better than everybody else. And it's probably what lots of common farming people thought. And some of the Roman soldiers that had been treated badly by their own army decided, we're going to join, So Spartacus proved to be an excellent tactician, defeating 2 Roman armies, and he made good use of being a Roman legionary before. And town after town that they would capture, they would have recruits coming from the towns as well. In the spring of 72 BC, 1 year before his eventual defeat, the rebels left their winter encampments and began to move northwards. At the same time, the Roman Senate, alarmed by the defeat of the Praetorian forces, dispatched a pair of consuls, Gallius and Claudianus. The 2 legions were initially successful, defeating a group of 30,000 rebels commanded by Crocus, who was one of the other part of the 5 leaders of this rebellion. But then this Third Roman army was defeated. So again, a Third Roman army defeated, probably a number of others. Alarmed at the continued threat posed by these individuals, Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome and the only volunteer for the position, he was the one that would take. Wait for it. Drum roll. 8 Roman legions into battle. 8. That's not thought of. You could not give anyone, you could not have it in the Roman world. You did not give anyone charge of 8 Roman legions. Eventually, the Roman army in the reign of Claudius would be about 25 Roman legions, right? Back then, there weren't as many Roman legions by far. So 8 Roman legions is probably half of the entire Roman army in the empire. Crassus could have basically said, right, I'm gonna defeat Spartacus, then I'm gonna march on Rome myself, and I could be this great dictator. And if you look at Crassus, something does happen like that, but not yet. Approximately, these soldiers were the ones that went into battle. And I mean, we mentioned the word decimation last week. You know what decimation means. None of these people would disobey the Roman army. When Spartacus and his followers, who for unclear reasons had retreated to the south of Italy, moved northwards again in early 71 BC, Crassus deployed 6 of his legions on the border of the region and detached his 2 other legions to maneuver behind Spartacus. Though ordered not to engage the rebels, the leader of this army behind Spartacus, Mummaeus, attacked at a seemingly opportune moment, but was routed. So, my God, the Romans are defeated again. What's Crassus going to do? So Crassus had 6 legions with him, and probably a few other men. After this, Crassus' legions were victorious in several engagements, forcing Spartacus farther south through Lucania, going all the way down to Sicily. Crassus now had the upper hand, and Spartacus was encamped at the Strait of Messina on his way to Sicily, but he couldn't get over there. Spartacus made a bargain with the Sicilian pirates to transport him and some 2,000 of his men to Sicily. Bloody hell, we'll leave the rest behind. That's what we're going to do. Right, Rog? I've known you for years, but you can bugger off and we'll leave you guys behind. Now, that wasn't in the film. What was in the film? That everyone was going to be transported over to Sicily. Actually, they were going to be transported over to Africa, where he would have been safe. And then what he would do, he would allow his men to be slaughtered, tens of thousands of men and women, and then he would reinvade Italy. Apparently, I'm seeing some sort of things in this. He was betrayed by the pirates, who took payment and then abandoned the rebels. Best way to do it. Minor sources mention that there were some attempts to raft and shipbuilding by the rebels as a means to escape, but Crassus took specified measures to ensure the rebels could not cross to Sicily, and their efforts were abandoned. Spartacus's forces then retreated towards Rhegium, which is going a little bit further north. Crassus' legions followed, and upon arrival built fortifications across the isthmus of Rhegium. Despite harassing raids from the rebels, the rebels were now under siege. So let's just look at that little bit of a map again. Let's sort of go to the map. And here we go. Oh, so we're heading all the way down here. And you know, he's stuck. He's going to be stuck. We see this portrayed in the film, that they're stuck. They can't go anywhere. The Romans have now trapped them. Whatever gave the Romans the upper hand when their army after army had been defeated, I don't know. I really don't know. At this time, and then the other pièce de résistance, Pompey arrived with his legions from Spain, ordered by the Senate to head south to aid Crassus. While Crassus feared that Pompey's arrival would cost him the credit, Spartacus unsuccessfully tried to reach an agreement with Crassus. When Crassus refused, Spartacus' army broke through the Roman fortifications and headed further north. When the legions managed to catch a portion of the rebels separated from the main army, discipline among Spartacus's forces broke down as small groups independently attacked the oncoming legion. Spartacus now turned his forces around and brought his entire strength to bear on the legions in a last stand in which the rebels were routed completely, with the vast majority of them being killed on the battlefield. So we're heading towards up towards Rome way. Final battle that saw the assumed defeat of Spartacus in 71 BC took place on the present territory at a site known close to Calabrito. And it was in 1899 that they actually found this battle site. So they actually had archaeological evidence to say that at a place in Italy called Calabrito, they actually worked out near the Appian Way. What's wrong, Del?
Carl, I gotta go because I've got to sort my gardener out and pay him.
I tell you what, next time get a different uphill gardener because that gardener's doing my head in.
I know.
Okay, Del.
Does my head in as well, but he's doing a good job.
Del, we'll see you tomorrow. We were actually nearly coming to the end, but if you gotta go, you gotta go.
I've got to. Sorry, really sorry.
Okay.
Bye, everyone. Look,
See you,
Carl,
Del.
that was fantastic.
Glad you joined us, Del. Glad you joined us.
Really enjoyed it.
Cheers, Del. Enjoy your gardening. Take care. Anyway, crack on, folks. So, what the objectives, the final throw of the dice. None of Spartacus's actions overtly suggest that he aimed at reforming Roman society or abolishing slavery. The Roman writer Plutarch writes that Spartacus wished to escape initially into Gaul and disperse his men back to their homes. If escaping the Italian peninsula was indeed his goal, it is not clear why Spartacus turned south after defeating the legions commanded by the other legionaries. There was nothing stopping him going north. He could have just simply gone north and everyone could have gone home, including Spartacus. Based on the events in late 73 BC and early 72 BC, which suggest independently operating groups of escaped slaves, and a statement by Plutarch, it appears that some of the escaped slaves preferred to plunder Italy rather than escape over the Alps. So in other words, this may have just been, wanton destruction of Italy. Did these people actually want to go anywhere? Was it, what was going on? And finally, just sort of ending on this, really, in modern times, Spartacus became an icon for communists and socialists. Karl Marx, when he was wandering around the British Museum, listed Spartacus as one of his heroes and described him as the most splendid fellow in the whole of ancient history, and a great general, noble character, real representative of the ancient proletariat. There you go. Spartacus has been a great inspiration to left-wing revolutionaries, most notably the German Spartacus League, a forerunner of the Communist Party of Germany. The Spartacus League in Germany, basically, in Germany you had socialism developing, and as the soldiers were at the front league, you had this Spartacus League, right? And it actually had serving soldiers on it who were acting against the state, and this was sort of. This was based on what was happening in the Spartacus Rebellion. January 1919, uprising by communists in Germany was called the Spartacus Uprising. And the Spartacus books, one of the longest running collectively run leftist bookstore in North America, is also named in his honor. So, in other words, the legend of Spartacus survives in many ways and in many places. And finally, we've got the film itself, Spartacus. There's been various television series. There's been lots of work in literature, music, video games. And if you're followers of sport, in Russia, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 football teams named after Spartacus. Spartacus Moscow, Spartacus Kostroma. In Bulgaria, Serbia, Slovakia, and other countries, they all name their football teams after Spartacus. On that note, we'll call it a day. Are there any questions?
Yep.
Go for it.
Well, first of all, there's a Spartacus the opera as well by the famous Russian composer whose name I just forgotten.
Oh, I can tell you that, Bill. It's an opera. So
They used the love theme for the Oneiden line many years ago.
Alexander North, yeah, the love theme, and you've got Spartacus Overture by Camille Saint-Saëns. Camille Saint-Saëns in 1863. I know it. Yes.
Right. Oh, okay. Then I got that 3 points.
Go on.
First of all, it's of particular interest to hear a factual history against the Hollywood version and see where they got it right and where they got it wrong. Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Because I'm a big Gladiator fan.
Let's not do that, Bill.
Let's not do that. Okay. That's that one. The other thing is, there was a TV series of Spartacus made a few years back, which was extremely graphic as regards sex and disembowelment and decapitation. A lot.
Oh, we got. Hang on. We got
Probably
this.
Remember it, yeah.
There's a few on here. There's
a number of series actually went on for a few years, different series, etc. The interesting thing, of course, that the owner of the Gladiator School was Batiatas, which sounds very similar to the character that Ustinov played. Probably the same one. So when they tinker with history, they get some things wrong and some things right, which is okay.
Dramatic effect.
Yeah. The other question is, what was the first and second Servile Wars?
Now that's interesting.
Don't expand on it, but that's for the future maybe. Okay.
The television series was called Spartacus, and it came out in 2010, 2013.
You must have seen it. It was extremely graphic.
Roger, we got to get and watch that.
Right. Okay. The other thing, just moving away from Spartacus, the map of the expansion of Rome you showed, 100 BC, showed that the Romans, for some obscure reason, had no interest in the island of Crete because they hadn't invaded it, colonized it. Now that's interesting, considering it's so close to other places where they had control, like Greece, southern Greece.
It was a separate kingdom like Cyprus, but obviously they all fell.
Yeah, for some reason, maybe they had a treaty with it, or I don't know, but this is interesting. I've been to Crete a few times, and I was never aware of any Roman connection. I might be wrong about that, but there was something different going on at this period in history between the Roman Empire and Crete. Interesting to know what that was. Probably you never will.
And also, what I will say on Roger's behalf, Roger, if you want to come over here, there's 39 episodes of Spartacus, the porn version, right? That'll keep us busy, Roger.
That's what attracts people. Actually, there's a lot of what in it.
Oh well, no, me and Roger are into that for purely professional reasons.
There we are. Okay, thanks, Carl. That was great.
And so what we're going to do, we got that question about the second. We'll look at the Second Servile War. So we got the Second Servile War. That was, the Second Servile War was 104 to 100 years BC. And that was a slave uprising as well. Do you know what would be interesting, right? If there was a fourth Servile War, I'm just going to look that one up, actually. The fourth, I got a feeling that there may have been. Hang on a minute. So you've got the... Strange enough, did I refer to it as the Third Servile War?
You did.
Yeah. Some historians call it the Fourth Servile War.
Ah.
So they actually, it's saying was the fourth and final uprising. So in other words, there were four. Some historians believe there were three Servile Wars. Others there were four. Really interesting point. And you know what? Pat's going to ask this. She's going to want to know about the First Servile War, just for Pat, right? So the First Servile War. That actually took place on Sicily in 135 years BC. And basically, there was only 400 slaves involved, but they did a lot of damage. So anyway, right. I'm sorry, I've gone off on a tangent here. Right. So, Dirty Roger, anything quick?
Yes, that's surprising. They didn't nip it in the bud. When he was starting to get slaves together, which is surprising because if slaves are busy with their masters, how the heck could they all gather and build what they did? Surprising how they let it go before they actually tackled them.
I think, Roger, I think the answer is that it wasn't just slaves. It may have actually been the slave owners may have thought, mind my French, fuck this, I'm going to get involved. I want to bury this as well. Bill, let's go along for the show. You know, we could make some money out of this.
Yeah,
We could sell food. We you know, this is a money making opportunity. Me and Richard, we could even sell our books, Rich.
So strict that they stop anything.
Spartacus is box office, always has been.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and Richard Spartacus as well. Before we ask Pat any questions, what's that, Rog?
So that was the point. It's surprising how it got started up so much and got to the extent it did. It's amazing, and we'll never really know. It just amazes me.
Yeah, we won't really know exactly. Right. So Richard, anything you want to say, darling?
No, I'm.
Have you seen the Barron District News? Is it in there this week?
Not out till tomorrow.
Oh shit! Yeah, it's Thursday, isn't it? Did somebody tell me the clocks went back yesterday or forward?
No, they didn't. Because they didn't.
It was my frigging bloody stepchildren.
Oh.
You know, they come down. They said, it's 10 to 8, right? We don't have to go to school yet. The little shits, they wanted me to drive them to school. Right, I'm gonna have a right go at them when I come back. Right, Pat, I nearly fell for it. I really did. Pat, any questions?
No, not at all. Thank you very much.
Well, that's been a good one today. So what we're gonna do, hey, best of luck with the live class tomorrow. And
Yeah.
I've warned Pat. I can imagine Anne being in a right flap, right? Just laugh, Bill, right? Just let it go over your head.
Yeah, we will manage, Carl. Don't worry. Even if you have the class on the pavement, we will manage. Yeah.
Oh, that's happened before.
Yeah.
So, all right then. If there's no other questions, it's been a delight this week. We're doing. We'll be doing Varus next week, and the following week Vercingetorix, and we'll keep the theme of these things going. Okay then, Pat, great to have you along, and Roger, and Bill, and Richard, and don't forget, hey Rog, don't forget your check.
It's gone.
I know it has. I was just winding you up.
Oh.
And you, Pat.
Yes.
Anyway, don't worry about it. I've enjoyed this today. It's been different.
Yeah,
It's been
interesting.
It's in your
different.
bank.
Hey, Carl, we must do General Maximus in the future on Gladiator. Because there was one, wasn't there? There was a Maximus.
There was a real General Maximus. There was the real General Maximus was actually put into retirement. He'd been a real good general. And like many generals, basically Maximus, at the end of the reign of Marcus Aurelius in 180, and his adopted son Lucius Versus was already dead, and it went over to Commodus, as in the film. But Marcus Aurelius wasn't poisoned by all accounts. The great supporter of Marcus Aurelius was actually this Maximus fella, who was actually put in retirement. The empire started to fall apart under the reign of Commodus. And it sounds very similar what happened in the Second World War. Some of Adolf Hitler's most accomplished generals, other than Gagarin, were actually placed into retirement. And a good example is Rommel.
Well, who was forced to commit suicide.
What Rommel could have done to defend the but that was something else. But anyway.
Okay, thanks, Carl.
Many thanks, Pat, Rog, Bill, Richard. See you tomorrow and enjoy tomorrow. Take care. And don't forget tonight as well with Jess. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye, folks. Bye-bye. That was a good one. And stop. Spoils it by mentioning the chat.